The Raja Jackson scandal has shaken combat sports, but now a new voice has allegedly entered the firestorm. UFC legend Jon Jones is rumored to have spoken out, blasting Rampage Jackson's son as a weakling for hitting a man while unprepared, adding, "He's not a man, he's a boy, and this boy needs to go to jail." These words, whether fully confirmed or not, have spread across headlines and ignited fresh debate. In this video, we'll break down the incident, Jon Jones's alleged reaction, and the shockwaves it's sending through the fight world. It all started with what many believed would be a small-scale wrestling appearance, nothing more than entertainment in front of a modest crowd. Raja Jackson, the son of MMA legend Rampage Jackson, had been dabbling in appearances, trying to carve out his own identity in the combat sports-adjacent world. But instead of showcasing charisma or discipline, Raja delivered one of the ugliest and most shocking moments the community has ever seen. The video spread within minutes, Raja lifting an opponent known as Psycho Stu high into the air, slamming him down with reckless force, and then unleashing a flurry of punches on an already limp and unconscious body. The crowd gasped. Some thought it was part of the show at first, but then the reality sank in. The opponent wasn't moving. Referees hesitated, unsure whether this was scripted or real, and Raja continued his assault until officials finally dragged him off. By then, the damage was done. The footage hit social media like wildfire. Fans debated whether they had just witnessed a staged hardcore match gone too far or something much darker, a calculated attack that crossed the line into attempted murder. Reports began surfacing that Psycho Stu had suffered serious injuries, with whispers of concussions, internal damage, and a hospital stay. Suddenly, this wasn't wrestling. This wasn't MMA. This wasn't sport. It was violence in its rawest and ugliest form. The most chilling part of the clip wasn't even the slam. It was Raja's demeanor. He wasn't performing for the crowd. He wasn't selling a storyline. He was enraged, muttering under his breath, pacing like a predator, circling prey. When people looked closely at his lips during the footage, some claimed he said, "This ain't no game." If true, that one line confirmed what so many feared. This wasn't entertainment. It was real. Almost immediately, comparisons were drawn to other infamous combat sports incidents. Paul Daly's sucker punch on Josh Koscheck after the bell, Mike Tyson's ear bite on Evander Holyfield. But what made Raja's act so disturbing was the complete lack of provocation at that moment. Psycho Stu wasn't trash-talking. He wasn't attacking. He was unprepared, vulnerable, and ultimately left defenseless against a barrage of punches he never saw coming. The fallout was instant. Fans across Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube called for Raja's arrest. The hashtags #BanRaja and #LockHimUp began trending within hours. Analysts labeled the attack career suicide, with some even speculating that Raja had just destroyed not only his own chances of following his father into combat sports, but also damaged Rampage Jackson's legacy in the process. What should have been a forgettable small-time wrestling event had now become the most viral and controversial combat sports scandal of the year. And for Raja Jackson, it was only the beginning of the storm. The days after the attack were a whirlwind of outrage, speculation, and mounting pressure. Raja Jackson had wanted attention, but he got it for all the wrong reasons. The MMA community, usually quick to argue and disagree on everything, found itself strangely united. Nearly everyone condemned him. Former and current fighters lined up to deliver their takes. Derek Brunson tweeted bluntly, "That wasn't MMA, that was criminal." Ryan Garcia called the act the worst thing I've seen in a minute, demanding that Raja face prison time. Fitness streamers and influencers mocked him for going after a man who was already unconscious instead of proving himself against real fighters. It wasn't just criticism, it was humiliation. The internet amplified it tenfold. Clips of the slam were replayed endlessly with slow-motion edits, commentary overlays, and reaction videos. Some compared Raja to an out-of-control street thug. Others said he had the ego of a fighter, without any of the skill or discipline. Memes began circulating labeling him Raja the Weakling, a nickname that stuck in online circles almost immediately. Even Rampage Jackson's attempts to defend his son fell flat. In one of his first first public comments, Rampage allegedly tried to frame the incident as retaliation, pointing to an earlier clip where Psycho Stu hit Raja with a beer can. But fans weren't buying it. A beer can isn't an excuse for attempted murder, one Twitter user replied. The defense came off as desperate, and worse, it made Rampage look like he was enabling his son's behavior. Behind the scenes, speculation grew that Raja might face criminal charges. Some outlets reported the LAPD was already investigating the incident after fans sent them the viral footage. Legal experts weighed in, saying the attack could easily be categorized as felony assault. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about MMA or wrestling. It was about whether Raja Jackson would end up in a courtroom. And while the public demanded justice, Raja himself only made matters worse. In streams and alleged private chats that leaked online, he appeared to brag about what happened, calling it the day I proved I ain't soft. The arrogance of his words deepened the outrage. To the world, he wasn't remorseful, he wasn't humbled, he was proud of what he had done. By this point, the backlash had transformed into something bigger than just MMA gossip. Raja's name was on mainstream news outlets. ESPN, TMZ, and BBC all covered the story, asking the same question. How could the son of a respected former UFC champion fall so far? Sponsors distanced themselves. Local gyms reportedly shut their doors to Raja, not wanting the negative publicity. The public consensus was clear. Raja Jackson wasn't just a disgraced fighter's son. He was now viewed as a dangerous liability to the community, and the pressure to hold him accountable was growing stronger by the hour. Just as the backlash reached a boiling point, the story took a new turn. Rumors surfaced that Jon Jones, arguably the greatest fighter in MMA history, had weighed in on the Raja Jackson scandal. Jones, never one to shy away from controversy, was allegedly quoted saying, "Hitting an unprepared man doesn't make you strong, it makes you weak." Fans immediately seized on this. Whether confirmed or not, it felt authentic. Jones has always been blunt, sometimes brutally so, and this sounded like the kind of harsh judgment only he could deliver. The timing made it even more explosive. Here was one of the most decorated champions in history, calling out the son of another legend. For many fans, it wasn't just commentary, it was a symbolic clash of legacies. Jon Jones, who built his career on beating the very best inside the octagon, versus Raja Jackson, whose reputation was now built on brutalizing an unprepared opponent. The contrast was stark. Jones had his demons, legal troubles, suspensions, arrests, but even his critics agreed. Inside the cage, his dominance was undeniable. Raja, on the other hand, was now being defined by weakness masquerading as strength. Social media lit up with side-by-side comparisons. Clips of Jones dismantling legends like Daniel Cormier and Shogun Rua were spliced next to Raja's reckless slam. Fans declared that Raja wasn't just a disgrace to MMA, but also to his father's name. And Jones's alleged words, whether spoken in an interview or leaked secondhand, poured gasoline on the fire. The message was clear. Jon Jones had drawn a line between what makes a fighter and what makes a coward. Raja, in his eyes, was on the wrong side of history. If the first alleged Jones quote sparked debate, the second one blew it wide open. In clips circulating online, Jones was reported as saying, "He's not a man, he's a boy, and this boy needs to go to jail." That phrase spread like wildfire. Memes popped up almost instantly. Raja photoshopped into schoolyards, Raja mocked as Rampage's boy, not his heir. But beneath the jokes was a serious undertone. In the fight world, being called not a man is one of the harshest insults imaginable. It meant Raja hadn't earned respect, hadn't shown honor, and most importantly, hadn't lived up to the code of combat sports. Jones's alleged demand for jail time also hit harder than expected. Coming from anyone else, it might have felt like empty outrage. But this was Jon Jones, a man who had himself faced arrests and legal battle. For him to say that Raja deserved prison time carried irony, yes, but also weight. To fans, it meant Raja's actions weren't just immoral, they were criminal. Some fighters agreed, echoing Jones's words and calling for harsh punishment. Others questioned the hypocrisy, pointing out Jones's own history with DUIs and legal trouble. But even critics admitted his assessment of Raja's actions wasn't wrong. By now, the scandal wasn't just about Raja Jackson anymore. It had become about legacy, about what separates men from boys in combat sports, and about the standards the community expects its fighters to live by. And Jon Jones's alleged words had set the stage for an even bigger firestorm. Jon Jones's alleged statement that Raja Jackson needs to go to jail immediately sent shockwaves across the combat sports world. It was one thing for fans and media pundits to call for accountability, but when one of the greatest fighters in history supposedly made the demand, the entire conversation changed. Jail was no longer just speculation. It was becoming the central debate. Legal experts weighed in, pointing out that the footage of Raja's attack looked like textbook felony assault. The slam, the barrage of punches, the refusal to stop even when his opponent was motionless. Every detail suggested intent to harm rather than performance. With viral video evidence being shared across platforms, pressure mounted on authorities to act. Some argued Raja should face years behind bars, while others felt a suspension and lifetime ban from combat sports would be punishment enough. Jones's words cut through that noise. Fans pointed out the irony. Here was Jon Jones, a man who had himself faced multiple arrests, now acting as judge and jury. But that irony only fueled the fire. As one commentator put it, if even Jon Jones says you deserve jail, you know you've crossed a line. The fighter community remained split. Some veterans echoed Jones's sentiment, saying Raja's actions disrespected every fighter who put their life on the line honorably. Others defended Raja, claiming his immaturity and pressure to live up to his father's legacy pushed him into making a catastrophic decision. But the debate always circled back to one truth. Raja's attack wasn't a fight, it was a crime. The phrase, "boy needs jail," became a trending tagline online, slapped on memes, clips, and commentary video. Raja's identity as a fighter had been reduced to that of a criminal in waiting, and thanks to Jones's alleged words, the push for legal accountability had reached its loudest volume yet. The MMA community thrives on drama, and Jones's alleged words poured gasoline on an already blazing fire. Fans across Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram erupted into chaos. Some praised Jon Jones for speaking the truth no one else was willing to say. They applauded him for calling Raja weak, childish, and dangerous. To them, Jones was standing up for the code of combat sports, that fights must be earned, not stolen through violence against the unprepared. Others, however, weren't so quick to celebrate. Critics pointed out the hypocrisy of Jones condemning Raja for criminal behavior, while Jones himself had spent years battling headlines about DUIs, arrests, and probation. Memes exploded showing Jon Jones calling someone a criminal next to screenshots of his own mugshots. It was brutal, but it only added fuel to the scandal. Still, even the most cynical observers admitted that Jones's words resonated because they were true. Raja's actions couldn't be defended, no matter who was saying it. In comment sections, fans wrote, "Even if Jones is the one saying it, he's right." Others added, "This isn't about hypocrisy, it's about accountability." The debate evolved beyond just Raja Jackson. It became about what makes a fighter a man. Is it discipline, honor, and respect? Or is it recklessness, ego, and violence without boundaries? By branding Raja a boy, Jones had thrown down a cultural gauntlet. He wasn't just calling him weak, he was stripping away his identity as a fighter altogether. As the scandal grew, fans began to wonder whether Raja himself would respond to Jones. Would he lash out? Would Rampage defend his son against the harshest critique yet? The tension only grew, and the community waited for the next chapter. Because if Jon Jones truly had called him out, then Raja's silence, or his reaction, would define the direction of the scandal moving forward. The Raja Jackson scandal wasn't just about one reckless act anymore. It had become a conversation about legacy. On one side was Jon Jones, widely regarded as the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, a man who had beaten every opponent placed in front of him and left behind a resume unmatched in UFC history. On the other side was Raja, the son of Rampage Jackson, who had no established career, no victories of his own, and now only a reputation tied to a viral act of violence. Jones's alleged words, calling Raja a weakling and a boy, struck deeper because of that contrast. Jones had proven his greatness inside the octagon countless times. Raja had proven nothing. Instead, he had tarnished the Jackson name, leaving his father's accomplishments overshadowed by a son who couldn't live up to the weight of the legacy. Fans noted the irony. While Rampage Jackson had once shared the cage with Jones himself in a legitimate UFC title fight, his son was now being compared to a street thug who attacked an unprepared man. The internet amplified the humiliation. Highlight reels of Jon Jones dismantling legends like Shogun Rua and Daniel Cormier were cut alongside clips of Raja's reckless slam, with captions like, "This is what a man looks like," and "This is what a boy looks like." It was a public shaming unlike anything Raja could have anticipated. For Rampage, the situation was devastating. His son's scandal was being used to diminish his own legacy. Fans began asking whether Rampage should publicly condemn Raja or risk being tied to his disgrace forever. Analysts speculated that Jones's comments might even have been as much about defending Rampage's legacy as they were about punishing Raja. If Rampage wouldn't hold his son accountable, Jones would. The clash of legacies was now unavoidable. Jon Jones's dominance had created a bar so high that Raja's actions looked like a pitiful imitation of strength, and by calling him a boy, Jones had set the tone for how history would remember him, not as a fighter, but as a failure. As the backlash hit its peak, Raja's camp allegedly responded to Jon Jones's scathing remarks. According to reports, someone close to Raja dismissed Jones's words as hypocrisy at its finest. The defense went further, claiming Jon Jones has no right to call anyone weak or demand jail time. He's been arrested more times than Raja has had fights. The pushback was bold, but it immediately backfired. Fans weren't interested in excuses, especially not ones that shifted focus onto Jones's troubled past. The irony was obvious. Yes, Jones had his share of arrests, DUIs, and suspensions. But unlike Raja, his legacy was still intact. He had accomplished greatness in the cage before his personal demons ever surfaced. Raja, by comparison, had no accomplishments to defend himself with. The more his camp tried to point fingers, the more desperate they appeared. Social media exploded with responses. One fan summed it up perfectly. "At least Jon Jones built something before he ruined it. Raja never built anything at all." Another added, "If Jones is calling you out, maybe take the hint. It's time to sit down and face the consequences." The alleged response from Raja's camp also raised another question. Where was Rampage in all of this? The MMA legend had stayed relatively quiet after his initial attempt to defend his son, but with Jones's comments dominating headlines, silence was becoming louder than words. Was Rampage protecting his son or distancing himself? Fans debated fiercely, with many suggesting that even Rampage must have been embarrassed by how the scandal spiraled. In the end, Raja's camp's attempt to deflect attention only deepened the sense that he had lost control of the narrative. By engaging in a war of words with Jon Jones, they ensured the story wouldn't fade. It became clear that Raja wasn't just facing punishment from the community, he was facing humiliation on a global scale. By the time the dust began to settle, the Raja Jackson scandal had spiraled into something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. What started as a shocking act of violence at a small event had grown into a global talking point, fueled by outrage, memes, and most of all, Jon Jones's alleged condemnation. The words weakling, boy, and needs to go to jail now hung over Raja's head like a permanent shadow. They weren't just quotes, they became the labels the public branded him with. In the eyes of fans, Raja Jackson wasn't simply a young man who made a mistake. He was now the poster child for wasted potential, arrogance without achievement, and violence without honor. Every time his name trended online, it was tied to disgrace. Every attempt to defend himself or to have his camp shift blame onto Jones only reminded people of what Jones had said in the first place. Raja had not earned the respect of the combat sports community, and he might never get it back. For Rampage Jackson, the fallout was equally devastating. His legacy as one of MMA's most charismatic and dangerous fighters was now tangled with his son's scandal. While Rampage had always been beloved for his humor, toughness, and heart, inside the octagon, Raja's actions forced fans to see the Jackson family in a different light. The silence from Rampage grew louder with every day that passed, and some speculated that even he knew his son's reputation was beyond repair. Meanwhile, Jon Jones's alleged words continued to echo. Whether or not he truly said them, the impact was undeniable. Fans and fighters alike treated them as gospel, as if Jones had spoken on behalf of the entire MMA world. His condemnation had drawn a line in the sand. There are fighters who live by the code of honor, and there are those who break it. Raja was firmly in the latter category. And so, the final image of this scandal isn't just Raja's brutal slam or his opponent's unconscious body. It's the aftermath, the silence of his father, the fury of fans, and the heavy weight of Jon Jones's words shaping his legacy. Where Raja Jackson goes from here is uncertain. He may face legal action. He may try to rebuild his image. He may even disappear altogether from combat sports. But one thing is clear. The damage is already done. In the end, Raja will always be remembered not as a fighter, but as the young man Jon Jones allegedly described, a boy who mistook recklessness for strength and in doing so destroyed his future before it even began.